You're obviously co-chair of the Government Administrations and Elections Committee, GAE. We've talked about this in the past before. It's a pretty broad umbrella when people hear that committee name. So I just want to start off, for those who don't know, what is the focus of GAE? What do you all kind of handle on that committee?
So you're right. It is a committee whose name begs explanation. We handle everything related to elections, campaign finance, and voting, but we also have a remit over a lot of government operations and processes. We have cognizance over state contracting and procedures for state contracting. We have remit over a lot of good government laws and procedures, including freedom of information, state ethics, and other related matters. And we also govern the structures of government, the processes of government. So it's basically all the things related to how government works, especially the executive branch and authorities and quasi-public agencies, except for how they're funded.
The GAE committee's had one public hearing so far. It was quite a doozy going until past 3 o'clock in the morning, a really long one. So I want to get into some of those bills which had people showing up and signing up to testify. I want to start with those two proposed constitutional amendments. One that I think really sparked the most debate would be to change the way Connecticut protects against discrimination on the basis of sex. It would include abortion protections and gender-affirming care in the state's Equal Protection Acts. Tell me a little bit more about that measure.
Sure. So this is a resolution for a constitutional amendment to incorporate Connecticut's current statutory protections for discrimination on the basis of sex into the Constitution. And just to be clear, we already have a strong statute protecting people on the basis of discrimination related to gender identity and related to sex. And our state courts have ruled that current state ERA and our anti-discrimination statutes apply to abortion-related matters as well. So this would be incorporated those protections into the state constitution to make sure that people can rely on them for the long term, that they're not going to be at the discretion of a given legislature. And that's important because of the attacks we're seeing from the current administration. They are going after LGBTQ individuals. They are going after organizations that serve them. And that's also true from the administration's Project 2025 agenda that was part of their campaign and has been enacted in significant part in the opening days. So we need to take whatever measures we can to not only protect individuals in our state from discrimination, ensure that their rights are protected, but also that they'll have the confidence that those rights will be protected in this state in the months and the years to come.
And you mentioned that there are protections already in the state constitution. That was part of the reasoning that we heard in that public hearing, a little bit of pushback from some of your Republican colleagues on the committee saying, well, if we already have protections, why do we need to expand them even further? What's your response to that?
Well, I think these are protections that people should be able to depend on. And it gives them confidence that they'll be able to make a life here in Connecticut, that the wind's not going to change in the legislature and they're going to be having their rights ripped away from them. They have the right to have the confidence that Connecticut is going to stand on their side and protect their rights for the long term. And so, yes, we have great laws currently in the state of Connecticut. We've been a leader on protecting abortion and reproductive rights. We've been a leader on protecting LGBTQ rights. But people in this state deserve to have the confidence that in the long run, those rights are going to be protected. And that's what this potential constitutional amendment would do.
The other one that was brought up was relating to environmental rights. A similar bill was brought up last year in the previous session. Is this proposed amendment the same premise as that previous bill?
Yes, it's very similar. It would, again, constitutionalize a number of our statutory protections that currently exist in law, and it would create certain additional potential rights of action to hold us, the legislature, accountable. We currently have very good environmental protections in our law. They could be stronger, and this may lead to that being the case. But there's currently no protections to ensure that we as the legislature guarantee people's right to clean air water, and protection to combat the effects of climate change. And this would essentially enshrine our current protections in law and make sure that individuals in our state could hold us, the legislature, accountable if we are not holding up our end of the bargain to protect people's environmental rights and their clean air and water and protection.
One of the big concerns we heard from opposition was what you just mentioned there, that this would open up the state of Connecticut to a flurry of lawsuits and legal action just, for that reason. Is there any way you can see to kind of combat that or quell some of those concerns this time around?
Yes, we're in active consultation with the State Attorney General's office, and they currently enforce our state environmental laws, so they have great expertise in this area, and they've made a number of recommendations to us about what direction we can and perhaps should go with this amendment to make sure that it strikes the right balance. We certainly are cognizant of those concerns. We don't want to create a situation where we've created law that would protect or prevent housing from being built where it is appropriate to do so. We don't want to create a tool that could be abused. And so it's important that if we go forward with this measure, we strike the right balance. And we are actively working on doing that with the authorities and the experts who have the most expertise on the subject.
And I want to clarify before we move on, because I think we hear a lot of times from viewers or from people some confusion around proposed amendments to the state constitution. These bills don't immediately amend the state constitution if they were to pass. Can you explain a little bit about what path forward they actually do give if passed by the legislature this session?
That is a great point. And we in Connecticut have a particularly arduous path to amending our state constitution. So the procedure is that if we pass a resolution through the General Assembly by 75% in both houses, the House and the Senate, then it goes to the voters for their approval or disapproval in the next statewide election. So at the earliest 2026. But I can tell you there are almost no constitutional amendments that get a 75% margin in both houses. And so what that means is that it would have to be approved by a 51% margin, a majority in each house in two separate general assemblies. So that would be an election in between the two general assemblies that approve the measure, which would put it on the ballot in 2028. So this conversation is one that it's most likely going to happen over a number of years. And we think it's important that the public have the opportunity to not only be aware of this potential measure, but also to comment on it, because since our process takes so long and is so arduous, in order to have that conversation, we need to get people in the mix as soon as possible. And so we think that this measure properly protects people's rights and is ultimately a good one to go forward, but we want people to comment on it.
Two of those other bills that were a part of that public hearing that we saw people talking about, AI and deceptive media in elections, and then including a non-binary gender marker on state forms. Can you tell me a little bit about those two?
Sure. So we have seen AI take off in a way that has already revolutionized a lot of how we participate and interact with technology. And that's only going to accelerate. One particular area of danger that AI presents is that it's relatively easy to create fake video or audio of an individual doing or saying something that they never did. And that obviously presents a danger for our elections. We don't want that sort of manipulation or influence of our elections, especially by foreign adversaries. And so a number of states across the country have passed measures to ban essentially deepfake videos that would falsely portray somebody in a way that would impact an election. And we would be, I think, either the seventh or the eighth state to do that at this point. We have developed a measure that would essentially prohibit those sorts of deepfake videos with a number of exceptions to ensure that First Amendment protections are upheld, including if there's a disclaimer saying that the video is manipulated, protections for satire and parody and artistic license. What we don't want is a video being out there or a audio or other imagery or information that is knowingly false, depicts something that never happened or was never said, and is meant to influence our elections during the period right before those elections in a way that our voters can't be informed that it's false and misleading. This bill would create a process by which the secretary has to make an evaluation of what steps are necessary to go forward with changing our state forms so that they accommodate non-binary options, and in particular, probably one non-binary option. There are people in our state, thousands of them, that don't identify as either strictly male or female, don't present as strictly male or female. And we think it's important on the committee to allow people to identify themselves to the state in the way that most accurately depicts how people perceive them and how their identity is expressed. And so for us, this is a common sense measure to allow people to express themselves to the state in the way that best identifies them.
And then you're also a member of the legislature's Reproductive Rights Caucus, which just unveiled priorities for this session last week. Walk me through what some of those biggest measures are on your 2025 to-do list.
Yeah, I'm proud to be co-chair of the Reproductive Rights Caucus. We're well over 40 members strong, bicameral, bipartisan, and we've been extremely effective in passing legislation to ensure that people's reproductive health care here in Connecticut is protected and accessible. And we're going to continue to pursue that agenda this session. Among the many priorities we have, I think are probably two essential ones. One is ensuring that reproductive health care is sufficiently funded in this state. And that's especially important because of the Trump administration and Project 2025's threats against reproductive health care. We want to make sure that it's accessible and affordable to everyone in the state of Connecticut. The other is making sure that our SHIELD law is as bulletproof as possible. In 2022, through the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, we passed first in the nation reproductive health care SHIELD law. I was proud to co-author it and lead passage of it through the House. And we're very proud of that law. We want to make sure that it's not only the first in the nation, but the strongest in the nation. And frankly, that's what residents of Connecticut deserve.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle at the start of the session, before we kicked off, when I spoke with them, were saying they knew this year was going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of waiting and seeing from the second Trump administration to kind of figure out how to respond. This is obviously a budget year. You mentioned the importance of funding. In our last minute here, what's your sort of message to residents about what you all are doing at the state capitol?
The Trump-Musk, frankly, dismembering of government over the past month or so poses a real threat and is imposing real costs on people across the nation and here in Connecticut. These wide-scale, completely not thought out cuts to federal jobs, federal employees, to programs that deliver essential services to people across this state, they're already having destructive effects. And that's why we acted this week in the legislature to tide over a number of really important organizations that are being targeted by these Trump-Musk federal freezes. They may be illegal, they may ultimately be stopped by the courts, but right now people are being affected. $14.3 billion of federal funding flowed to Connecticut residents last fiscal year. It would be catastrophic if that money went out the door. There would be mass job losses, there would be mass unemployment, there would be families not putting food on the kitchen table, essential services wouldn't be delivered. And so we need to fight back to the Attorney General's office, and we need to give him the support and resources that he needs. We need to fight back with the governor to make sure that these programs are preserved. And we need to do whatever we can at the state level to ensure that these organizations, that the businesses, that the workers who are affected are protected to the greatest extent possible.
That does it for us here on The Real Story. Of course, you can watch these segments again on fox61.com or on the free Fox 61 News app, and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. Have a great rest of your morning.